um, do not be shy to drop where you're from. We're from the great state of Robinson. So until I see another name, I'm going to continue to say the great state of Robinson is in the house. So good evening, everyone, and thank you for joining us tonight in New World Project for our urgent conversation. Let's talk education. And I like to rephrase that to say the Let's Talk Public Education. I am Caroline, New World Project's Policy and Program Director. The purpose of this discussion tonight is to bring awareness and education to voters in North Carolina, particularly in New World Project's 7 focus counties, which are comprised of Union, Anson, Richmond, Scotland, Polk, and Robinson County. So some of you say, if you're new to the New World Project family, we say welcome. For those of you that have kind of been around with New World Project for the past 4 years, we say welcome back. Come on in, enjoying the fun. So just a little background information about New World Project. Our vision, we envision a future where all rural citizens use their civic power and engagement to foster and sustain vibrant and successful communities. Our mission at New World Project, as a nonprofit organization, we engage young and marginalized residents in rural communities out of the 7 focus counties that I mentioned earlier. And we amplify their voices through increased civic and electoral engagement. And we also work to eliminate barriers to engagement by listening to rural stakeholders and working together to develop community-driven solutions. So that's just a little more information about NRP. So when you say, okay, we mentioned those 7 counties briefly earlier, and so we're going to talk about just kind of where we're located, where we do the work. All right. So NRP's work is focused on the 7 counties, as you can see on the screen: Moore, Hoke, Robinson, Union, Anson, Richmond, and Scotland. And just a little background on some of our counties. Robinson is a majority minority county with almost equal 3-race split in population among its Caucasian, Native American, and African American populations. It is also one of the most distressed of our North Carolina 100 counties. Anson, Scotland, and Hoke counties are also a majority minority counties and are among North Carolina's most economically distressed Tier 1 counties. And we organize our work to focus here at NRP on 4 main focus areas, and that's education, healthcare, public safety, and voting rights. Hence our purpose for tonight's presentation, Let's Talk Education. There are many things that unite all of us on this Zoom tonight. We have all been children, right? Some of us might want to think I'm not over 21 on a good day, but we think back, we've all been children. Most of us, if we close our eyes just for a moment, think about how your life would be different without education. It's kind of dark. So if your eyes are closed, it's dark. So without education, it would be dark. A stronger rural North Carolina starts with equal access to education. It ensures that every child, no matter their race, background, or community, will be educated fairly. Right now, politicians in North Carolina, in the North Carolina legislature, are systematically underfunding our public schools while expanding the controversial Opportunity Scholarship Program. Over the next 10 years, $4 billion in taxpayer money will be diverted from public education to subsidize private school tuition, often for wealthy families without proper oversight or accountability. This inequitable funding creates real barriers for students across our state. And as we see focus on our screen before you, our focus counties, we look at the number of students that are enrolled in our 7 focus counties, the number of public schools that service our focus counties, and the number of Title I schools in these districts. We have 3 of our counties that are Title I districts. And so when we think about all the different executive orders, the funding, the Title I funds, and their purposes, and what they do to assist our children to level the playing field for them to be and aspire all that they want to be, it's startling. Public schools, which serve the vast majority of North Carolina's children, are struggling with outdated materials, underpaid teachers, crumbling infrastructure while taxpayers' dollars flow into private institutions that aren't necessarily held to the same standard. So this is just an overview of what we talk about tonight. I want you all to know that this meeting is being recorded and will be available for later viewing. I want to thank you for your participation. Now I would like to introduce our fearless leader, our very own Cynthia Wallace, New Real Project's co-founder and executive director. Thank you, Cynthia.
All right. Thank you so much, Caroline. Can you hear me? So prayerfully, I have switched Wi-Fi settings, so hopefully I will stay with you. All righty. So thank you, Caroline, and your team for leading preparation for this timely and important discussion. And once again, good evening, everyone. And thank you for joining us for tonight's urgent conversation. Let's talk North Carolina public education. I'm adding that in, like you said, Caroline. I'm so honored that the team asked me to serve as the moderator tonight. Across North Carolina and frankly, the nation, public schools are facing unprecedented challenges like reduction in staffing of the Department of Education. Right here in North Carolina, as Caroline mentioned, North Carolina House Bill 10, which was passed last year, allocated an additional $463 million to the state's private school voucher program. Analysis shows that and they predict that public schools could lose well over $100 million in state funding due to this, with some rural counties and those low wealth counties, both of which are most of the counties New Rural Project focuses on, could face up to an 8% decline in state funding. These changes influence a wide range of areas, including classroom supplies, after school activities, teacher recruitment and retention, as well as the support services available to students. These effects extend well beyond students and educators, though. It reaches families, the wider community, and even our economy. So tonight, we're going to talk about these things and much more. So we're fortunate to be joined by a panel of distinguished leaders who will bring diverse perspectives and deep expertise to this discussion. So here's what's going to happen next. You're going to meet our panelists. So if they can all be spotlighted, that would be great. And they're each going to spend about 2 to 3 minutes introducing themselves. They'll tell us a little bit about their background, where they work, and their role or affiliation with North Carolina public school education. So we're going to start with Nicole Price.
Good evening, everyone. Thank you, Ms. Wallace and Ms. Sumter, for inviting me to speak. My name is Nicole Price. I serve as the Associate Executive Director for the North Carolina Association of Educators. I am honored to join this conversation tonight on behalf of our state president, Tamika Walker-Kelly, who had a short, unexpected scheduling conflict with our national office. NCAE is the state's largest professional association for educators and public school employees. Anyone in K-12 public education can be a member of NCAE. At our core, we believe every child, no matter zip code, race, or income, deserve access to a fully funded, high-quality public education. And I've spent my career advocating for like the past 2 decades, almost 3 decades, advocating for affordable healthcare and, of course, public education. And I know I'm supposed to spend some time introducing myself more, but I'm not going to do that. I want to say a little bit about the work that NCAE has done in the last 2 years. Much like the New Rural Project and the brainchild of Ms. Wallace and her team and the other co-founders, they're trying something different. And so I want to share a little bit about the work that we've done. This may not seem like big news, but for the first time in 2024, we put our members, educators, on the doors talking to voters. Why is this important? As Ms. Sumter already shared in her introduction, education is at a crossroads. Despite all the great work that's happening in our public schools, there's a man-made challenge affecting our schools. Chronic years of underfunding, expansion of private school vouchers, which you've heard about, I'm sure we'll hear more about. So putting educators on the doors, going directly to talk to voters, the level of conversation that they are able to have with voters about what's truly happening in schools is unimaginable. So for the first time in 24, we did that. And although it is blazing hot right now in North Carolina, we have educators out again in 2025 talking to voters. This time, we're opening with a basic question. What do you think about public schools? And to my surprise, I was out with them on Saturday with my 8-year-old cousin along with me in the heat, sweating. And the conversations that people are willing to have on the door from just that simple question, what do you think about public schools? They talk about the teacher pay. They talk about the shortage in staffing. And they will stay on the doors, or stay at the door for 7-10 minutes, just talking about their experiences, their child experiences, and their desire and vision for our public schools. So I know I was supposed to introduce myself, but I really want to introduce the work that we're starting to do because it is new and different for NCAE. And knocking more than 20,000 doors when I thought we were only going to knock 2,000 is amazing work, and we're just trying to build on that. Thank you, and look forward to the conversation this evening.
All righty, thank you. And you did a perfect introduction, Ms. Price, so no apologies, that was awesome. So now we are going to introduce and allow Reverend John Kirkpatrick to introduce himself. And I'll just let you take the wheel, Reverend Kirkpatrick.
Yes, ma'am. Thank you, Ms. Wallace, and thank you, New Rural Project, for this opportunity. I am John J. Kirkpatrick IV. I am a native of Marshville, North Carolina, and I wear that badge proudly. I am a proud member of the 28103, as some of my friends we like to say. I'm a graduate of Morris College out of Sumter, South Carolina, small HBCU there, where I majored in political science. After graduating in 2006, I started working in education. I worked at a small school in Union County, and I went and worked in CMS, Morgan School, Druid Hills. Then I went to Reed Park, where I worked for Communities and Schools. And then I moved to Richmond County as the executive director of Communities and Schools. And so I was the first executive director that they had there. And then I came back home, moved back to Union County, where I worked in education and UCPS. I've done that. And again, I've been in education for 19 years, and I currently am the executive director of the Village Development Center, a nonprofit organization that I started in 2015, where we serve children and families. We currently now have a summer camp program that is going on, 19 students from kindergarten to 5th grade. And so for any of you who know anything about elementary students, there's never a dull moment. And so it's always exciting and full of energy, which is what I love. Our program, our organization, we not only serve elementary students, but we also serve middle and high school students as well. We have the empowerment team for young men, the charm school for young ladies. We have the Chat and Chew family nights, where parents can come and be empowered. We provide dinner for them, and we just allow them to receive information that will empower and strengthen the family dynamic, because we all can attest that the family dynamic is definitely under attack. And when families are strong, communities can be strong. And so we are excited about that endeavor that we're getting ready to reinitiate in the fall of this year. I've been in ministry since 2002. And so I've been doing that. And so I love people, I love God. And I'm also a proud member of the greatest fraternity, Phi Beta Sigma Fraternity Incorporated. I can't leave that out. And so I am here to serve. I'm not here to be served. I believe that is my calling. That is what I've been called to do, even from a child, to serve humankind, all mankind, and to do the best that I can to make sure that I am a representation of what the true essence of Christ is all about, serving everyone. And if you study him, you know that he was very, very big on diversity, equity, and inclusion. He was disregarded on many occasions because he included those who were identified as outcasts, those who were not a part of the status quo. So I try to live by his rules and not by the religion and the creativity that has influenced our communities in such a downward way. And so I'm glad to be on this panel. I'm looking forward to this great conversation. And I believe that from this conversation, hopefully we all will leave with a greater passion and desire and fire to fight this good fight for public education. So again, thank you for this opportunity and looking forward to the continual conversation.
All right. Well, thank you, Reverend Kirkpatrick. And I was hoping we wouldn't start a whole thing with the fraternities in the chat. We'll see. All right, and last but certainly not least is our Superintendent of Instruction for North Carolina, Mr. Superintendent Mo Green. We are so excited. And one of the things is we were planning this event, we probably had a whole full court press on Superintendent Green. I think he heard from about 5 people from New World Project asking him to do this. And so we are excited that you very quickly agreed. And so we're excited to learn a little bit more about you and whatever you want to say about North Carolina schools. And then we'll jump into a few questions.
Excellent. Thank you so much, Cynthia, for having me, and thanks to the New Rural Project as well. Looking forward to the conversation. A little bit about my background. So born in New York, grew up in Georgia, been in North Carolina since I started undergraduate school. Attended Duke University and got my undergraduate degree and my law degree from Duke. I did pledge a different fraternity, Reverend Kirkpatrick, and I would say the best, Alpha Phi Alpha fraternity there. After finishing at Duke, I did do 2 judicial clerkships, one in the Middle District of North Carolina, and then one on the 6th Circuit Court of Appeals, and that was based in Cincinnati, Ohio. From there, I went into private practice, practicing law, and almost immediately upon practicing law, I started representing the Charlotte-Mecklenburg Board of Education, and that in many ways led me to where I am today, starting to work very closely with school systems, and represented CMS both as in private practice as an associate and a partner in the law firm, and then became the general counsel for Charlotte-Mecklenburg Board of Education, and then made the shift to administration, becoming the chief operating officer and then deputy superintendent for CMS. And then from there, became the superintendent of Guilford County Schools, served in that role for 7.5 years, and then served about 7 years as the executive director for the Z. Smith Reynolds Foundation, a philanthropic organization that funds solely in North Carolina, but one of the areas that it does fund in is public education. And then from there, decided to run for North Carolina Superintendent of Public Instruction, and was honored and blessed to have a majority of the voters ultimately vote for me last November. Started in this role in January of 2025. And I like to say that this role really has 2 major purposes. Serves as the Chief Administrative Officer for North Carolina Public Schools. And I like to say also the Chief Advocacy Officer for North Carolina Public Schools. Just a little bit of context, North Carolina Public Schools serves about 1.5 million students annually and 115 local school districts with about 2,500 schools. There are also more than 200 now charter schools and a variety of other schools as well. Back on a personal note, I will share that I've been married to my wife Stephanie for almost 33 years. If I'm blessed to make it to July 18th, it'll be 33. We have 2 adult children, both of whom did attend and graduate from North Carolina public schools. Honored and blessed to be in this role as North Carolina Superintendent of Public Instruction. Looking forward to the conversation this evening.
Oh, thank you so much, Superintendent Green. And I saw someone in the chat say that we are so glad that you decided to run, and we are extremely excited and glad that you are sitting in this seat for, as they say, such a time as this. So what we're going to do now is just give you all, throw out a few questions, have a little discussion here. And for those who are watching, please start thinking of your questions. We'd love to get you involved in the conversation in a little bit. So we are going to start with you, Superintendent Green. You know, as you said, it's a new role. So as you step into it, how do you envision advancing educational equity for all students across North Carolina, especially those in rural, low-income, or underserved communities?
Very good. So I believe one has to start with a vision for what is possible for students here in North Carolina. And so my vision is what we call achieving educational excellence. I believe all students can achieve at exceedingly high levels. And the recognition then that some students will need more than others for a wide variety of reasons. Certainly, you've listed a few, including location and income, but you can add to that English as a second language, exceptionalities that some students may have, and race. There are a number of reasons why some students may need more or different given a particular situation. And so with that sort of very high vision of all students can achieve at high levels, you then begin to talk about how do you put something like that in place. For me, what we did and what we are doing is putting together a strategic plan. This is after doing a listening and learning tour that took me across the state to hear from folks as to what they want for our public schools. We've put out a draft vision and a draft strategic plan. And we've shared that with the State Board of Education earlier this month. That vision is achieving educational excellence. It has 3 major components: academic achievement, character development, and then this concept of saying we can have the best public education system in the entire country. There are, at the moment, 8 pillars that will drive this work, and we have outlined a number of actions and measures to hold ourselves and everyone else accountable for results. But you can hopefully begin to see that there is a clear strategy that we're going to be implementing over the next few years to try to get us to a place where we are providing every student what they need to receive then that high quality education as well. Now, as I then drill into issues around the particular ones that you lifted up, rural and underserved communities, so we have to think about how we take the resources that we have, and I say we, that's both at the state level and then at the local levels, and be sure that we are actually thinking very creatively and intentionally about providing those resources to students who need them the most, recognizing that we don't have nearly the kind of resources necessary to do all that we can do. But we have to, with the resources that we have, try to provide them very strategically to support these students. We also have to try to get resources from perhaps unconventional places as well, philanthropic organizations. We were able to announce through the work of my predecessor and then I certainly agreed to push it forward, a $25 million grant from Golden Leaf Foundation, which is focused on our rural and distressed communities. This particular grant will actually focus on schools in the most distressed of our communities, Tier 1 and Tier 2 communities, rural communities. We'll focus on improving math outcomes in these communities. So that's an example of what we need to do to provide additional supports for students in these communities. There are others that I could lift up. We are right in the process now of redesigning how we provide supports from the Department of Public Instruction to support many instances lower performing schools and communities that have a number of schools that are lower performing as well.
Awesome. And it's, Caroline shared the map. 5 of New World Project's 7 counties are Tier 1 counties. And for those who don't understand the tiering system, North Carolina ranks all 100 counties from 1 to 100 in terms of measures about economic distress. The amount of homes, unemployment rates. And so in this instance, being number 1 is not a good thing. It's not a good thing. And Robeson County trickles between 1 and 2. And so those projects like that are very, very important to particularly communities and counties like ours. So Ms. Price, if you start unmuting yourself, I'm going to come to you and a question about NCAE and how you all are working with state policymakers to ensure equitable policies that support inclusive education environments for all students, regardless of zip code, race, or income.
Yes. Equity is at the foundation of everything that we do at NCAE. Our advocacy, our conversation with state policymakers, with local policymakers, centers on ensuring that public schools are fully funded, that every student, regardless of race, income, that they have access to qualified educators, to comprehensive services, high impact tutoring, and this includes rural and underserved communities receive targeted supports that they need to thrive. Whenever we meet with decision makers, we're always advocating for those things. When we speak at committee hearings, like just last week, in opposition to the DEI bills, we're always centering equity for all students. That includes fighting for better pay, professional respect for teachers, educational supports, more counselors, school nurses, critical infrastructure investments, especially in our hardest hit areas by like natural disasters in Western North Carolina and all underserved communities like rural North Carolina. I shared earlier that we have been out on the doors and we're out on the doors again. That's because the voices of those who are impacted, the voices of parents sending their students to public schools alongside our members matters, and equity is the lens in which we see our work through, and which we talk to when we talk to policymakers. That is what we center.
All right, and I love it that you all are lifting their voices, because at the end of the day, your organization, our organization, it's not our voice, it's the voice of those who we serve. And that's exactly what you all are doing. So Reverend Kirkpatrick, if you start unmuting yourself, what supports are in place or being developed to help educators actually address implicit bias and foster inclusive classrooms that reflect the diversity of the students? And I know Union County, some people think of it as the part that's close to Charlotte, but there's a whole lot of Union County, including Marshville and Monroe and Wingate, that are very different and may have different issues and concerns. So I'd love for you to weigh in on that question.
That is a great question. And it is disheartening to be able to give the answer that I'm going to give. And that is, we do not have programs, services, or trainings that support diversity in our community. And that comes from a place of fear, a place of not really understanding who you are called to serve. Union County is a very diverse community. I believe the numbers that were mentioned tonight, that was on the slides presentation, the slide presentation was 41,981 students. And these students make up all walks of life, who are students in all of our schools who need to feel safe, who need to feel a part, who need to understand how to interact with people and other students who may not look like them, who may not think like them, who may not live like them, who may not come from backgrounds like them. But within our community, within our school system, we have, within our county, I'm not even just going to put it on the school system, within our county, we have those who are elected officials who are a part of the movement that is trying their best to destroy opportunities of true education. Education that will strengthen the next generation, not to repeat some of the issues and some of the to destroy a lot of those stereotypes and systems that have been created for many, many years. But when you are not trying to starve the problem, then you're feeding the problem, meaning that you want the problem to continue. And so, as I said in the beginning, it is very disheartening for me to say that we do not have programs, but we have organizations in our community that are focused on trying to empower community members, even if it's not within the schools, within the classrooms. There are organizations that are definitely trying their best to empower our students, our families, and to get them to become open to education that's not their norm. So we have a lot of work to do here in Union County. And like you said, Ms. Cynthia, people think because we're close to Charlotte that we have a lot of those wonderful resources and connections. But it's very, very sad to say that even in Union County in 2025, we have those who have a 1950, 1960 mindset. And that is definitely discouraging. But again, we have those who are working on the problem. And so I was always taught, if you have been shown a problem, then you are part of the solution. So it's exciting to know that there are people in our community who are willing and who are able and who desire to make things better here in Union County.
Well, and that actually leads me to a question for you, Superintendent Green. As you mentioned, we talked about earlier with the vouchers, and one of the things that we talked about in the rural project is, in like these rural counties like Anson, I think they may have one charter school in the entire county. So a lot of these benefits, they aren't really applicable to, our rural and lower income counties. What guiding principles will shape, your decision? And I definitely make sure it's under your control, because everything's not, because we could go into a whole conversation about how the funding of schools actually works between the state and the counties. But how will you shape your decisions about resources such as vouchers and making sure they're distributed to ensure that every child has access to a high quality education, regardless of where they live?
Great. So I would lift up a few different guiding principles, starting first with the North Carolina Constitution. So the North Carolina Constitution itself provides that the General Assembly will provide by taxation or otherwise a general and uniform system of free public schools. It goes on to say, and wherein equal opportunities shall be provided to all students. So that's my first guiding principle. My second guiding principle is that that provision has been interpreted by the North Carolina Supreme Court to mean that all public school students have the opportunity to receive a sound basic education. So that's my second guiding principle. And those guiding principles, I think, when read together, suggest to me that the resources need to go first and foremost to North Carolina public schools so they can provide the sound basic education required by the North Carolina Constitution. And so when people bring up issues like vouchers, I immediately say, let's talk about whether we have adequate resources first. And if the answer is no, we do not, then not one penny should be going anywhere else but to our North Carolina public schools. Not one penny. And if you think about where we are in North Carolina, just to provide a bit of context, because I think it's important to do so, to sort of amplify why I would suggest that we don't have enough resources in our public school system in North Carolina, is if you compare us to the national average, or even to our border states, you will find that we are well short of that. So there's a report that comes out annually by the Education Law Center called Making the Grade. The most recent report that came out in 2024 suggests that nationally the average is a little over 16,000, closing in on $17,000 per student. If you think about where North Carolina is, we're a little over $11,000 per student. But even if you compare us to even South Carolina, that's over $16,000 per student, and Virginia, that's over $14,000 per student. You can see we are so far away from even our border states, much less the national average. And as I mentioned earlier, $1.5 million per 1.5 million students. You take that times that difference compared to our border states or the national average, and you're talking about real resources. So what do we then do with the resources that we have? Another guiding principle of mine is that you've got to be sure that all students receive what they need. And again, some need more and different than others. That is what equity ultimately is about. We do it. We might suggest to some folks that equity is like this horrible word now. But in fact, we all know that that's how we try to do things. And trying to provide kids who have exceptionalities, we provide additional money. For Title I dollars that go to serve students who are in our most impoverished schools, we provide additional resources. So this is what we should be doing, and that sort of guides the way that I do things as well. I think there's sort of me internally a moral obligation that really calls upon me that even if the Constitution didn't say it, even if the North Carolina Supreme Court didn't say it, I feel obligated and believe in my heart that we must provide the resources to allow every student to receive a high quality education. And that to me suggests that you've got to do things in a way that gives every kid opportunities, but some will just need more than others for us to get there. So that's those. And then let me just say one last thing, because I think this is critically important for the position that I serve in. I serve, as I said earlier, as the state superintendent of public instruction. This role suggests to me that I need to be advocating 100% of the time on behalf of public education. And so where others have been in this role and have talked about school choice, and I'm not opposed to school choice, but this role requires that I believe that I must have as a guiding principle, are we getting enough resources into our public schools?
Oh, I love it. And I love to be in this space with all of these servant leaders. And you made me think about also, and I think you're alluding to Leandro. that case, that if it was ever fully funded, it could transform rural North Carolina. It could transform urban parts of this, urban and struggling other school systems in this state. And for folks, that may not know, the genesis of that case was in Hope County, one of the new rural projects focused counties. And so we did one of these about 2 years ago, talking about Leandra. So we're all about education. And one of the things that you mentioned, and I'll throw it to either Ms. Price or Reverend Kirkpatrick, is Title I and federal funding. And we know a lot of things that we see every day. When we wake up in the morning, we see something happening federally, and when we go to sleep, there's something else happening federally. And as Caroline showed that page, almost several of our counties, 100% of the schools are Title I schools. And that is funding that comes from the federal government to try to create this equity that you talked about, and to help these exceptional children, not only around race, but all kind of other differences and abilities. So for Ms. Price or Reverend Kirkpatrick, if the Department of Education continues to be underfunded, what do you believe would be the most significant impacts on our state schools and rural low-income school districts in particular, especially regarding funding, civil rights protection, and educational equity?
Mr. Kirkpatrick, do you want to go or you want me to go?
First.
All right, thank you. I know you said funding or civil rights. I think our superintendent has laid out some of the challenges with funding in comparison to other states. And I'm sure Mr. Kirkpatrick will probably talk about funding. I think oftentimes the thing that is actually missed sometimes around this question, the thing that we don't focus on enough, is the civil rights part. We know that like our system of government is structured such that we have checks and balances. And so if we got the Department of Public Education, if we dismantle the Department of Public Education, a big part of its role was to ensure our civil rights were protected and to be a checks and balance on states when they are not doing the right thing. And so I feel like we don't talk about that part enough. Title I funding, students with disabilities, Title IX, right? We don't talk about those aspects of losing the Department of Public Instruction. I'm sorry, the Department of Public Instruction, the U.S. Department of Education, not DPI. And yes, it also means potentially losing billions of dollars. Even if that money came to the state in a Black grant, the civil rights component, what we could lose in terms of, again, just the checks and balances on not just North Carolina, but other states who don't always do the right thing. Superintendent talked about North Carolina's constitution that says we're supposed to guarantee every child a sound basic education. And if we're not doing that without some sort of balance on the state, what are we losing, even if the money was here? We're all on this call because we know that public schools are doing great work, and we also know that they have been historically underfunded. So it does not mean that even if the Black grant, the monies came to the states, that it would actually make it down to the classroom, that it will actually make it down to students with disabilities, that it will make it down to students in underserved communities. Right? It doesn't mean that. And yes, the money is critically important. It's absolutely important. But that aspect of holding states accountable, protecting our civil rights and student civil rights is equally critical as the funding.
Thank you. Awesome. Reverend Kirkpatrick?
Oh, I think we need to, and I agree with everything Ms. Price said, but I want to bring a point out. When we talk about Title I schools and we talk about the disadvantages of these schools, the locations of these schools, we also have to keep in mind that communities were built a certain way to be identified as underserved. If we look at Union County, you have the east side and you have the west side. And nothing is wrong with that. When you look at the west side of Union County, we see the the wealthy, and again, nothing is wrong with that. We as educators, we empower our students to one day become wealthy and to be homeowners and all of those things. But we have to look at the system that was created years ago to underserved communities. And now what is happening is we're seeing that the system has been producing students of diversity, students of change. And now their system that they once created is not responding the way they intended. So now this is an opportunity for them to defund public education, which is going to cause students, number one, who we already know are not able, their families are not able to attend private schools, okay? And some of these charter schools that are being developed and created and encouraged in our communities for students to attend, especially a lot of our students of color, are focusing on indoctrinating them with an agenda that is initiated from our current administration. So if we are not educated on what's happening, especially from the past, then in our current, we're going to continue to not be educated. And in this space right now, when Title I schools are not funded, we eliminate the opportunity for having male men of color in our classrooms who have previously, for those who have ever had a male teacher, I'm specifically talking about young men of color who have been identified when we look at the third grade test, all of those things that we see that our children are struggling and being challenged with. When we do not have men in the classroom who can earn a livable wage to take care of their families, then what happens, they will find careers in other employment and find other employment opportunities. And these young men that we are called to save do not have that savior. And people can say, oh, I'm just here to teach. No. When I was in the classroom, when I worked with students, I was identified and knew that I was called for some of those young men and even some of those young women to be their savior. I was their father figure. I was the only father figure that some of those kids had. And so when you don't have the right people in the classroom, that's another disadvantage for our students. When you don't have people, when you don't have educators who are able to create an energy in a classroom where students desire to come every day, then what you will do is limit the opportunity for advancement and acceleration. And so it is definitely an agenda to keep the broken broker and to keep communities, again, that they created. Okay, they created it. They created the system, and now they're trying to dismantle it because they are seeing that there are those individuals who are being empowered, who are coming out and coming and accelerating and advancing and becoming educated. So it becomes fearful to them. So now what we have to do is change the system so that we won't continue to see individuals who don't look like them, who don't live like them, but are just as good as them sit at their tables. So it's so much that can be talked about, and I'm going to get off that soapbox because I have talked to people about this over and over and over again. And even when you talk about equity, I remember my grandmother, she was telling me one day, we were talking, she said, when we were growing up and they went to, again, all Black schools and what have you, she said, we just wanted to be equal, to have everything that they had. She said, and she said it just like this. She said, we didn't want to go to school with white people. She said it just like that. She said, we just wanted to have, if they had good schools, we wanted to have good schools. If they had good books, we wanted to have good books. And so it's one of those things where it is so much that significant conversations like we're having tonight to allow all of us to open up our hearts and our minds to see where we came from, to see what really is, so that we know how to articulate, how to conversate, how to respond to what we're seeing, because we just cannot be angry about it, but we got to do something about it. And this conversation, I believe, is really helping us to really take a moment to say, okay, we see what they're doing. Now we have to strategize to make sure that it doesn't work and we can empower the greatest investment that we're here to talk about, and that's our kids.
All right, I can see what you brought to that classroom, that passion. And I think what you talked about is exactly true, which is when people say, can someone do something if they can't see it, if they can't see someone reflecting themselves? And so you really do need those diverse experiences in the classroom so that folks know how to even work with our children who are very different or come from different situations from home. And so I think you bring up an awesome point. So now we're probably going to see if we've got any questions. I think I saw one question in the chat. And if someone has a question, you can raise your hand or drop it in the chat. It's Reverend Kirkpatrick got us all riled up in here. We're ready to start go out and march right after this. Let's see. Let's see if I see one. If someone can drop me one of the questions, anyone, Eric, if you all see some of the questions. All right, here's one for you, Superintendent. You've embarked on the Mo Wants to Know initiative to gather input for a strategic plan. Could you elaborate on the key themes and priorities emerging from those listening sessions? And I know you've talked about it a little bit, but is there anything else you want to add and how that's going to shape your administration's approach to achieving that educational excellence that North Carolina used to really be known for? And I'm looking forward to us, if we keep fighting, to get back there. If we could unmute Superintendent Green.
Great. Thank you. And thanks for that question. And so, as I indicated at the outset, the strategic plan that's in a draft format right now really lays out what we heard from our community and where I think we need to go to achieve educational excellence. I mentioned that there are 8 pillars in the draft plan, and you can actually go online and see it. It is, if you go to the North Carolina Department of Public Instruction and then click on a tab that says Superintendent, you'll get to a place where you can find the strategic plan. You can also offer feedback on it as well, because it's draft now. We'll be taking feedback for the next few weeks as we move from draft to an actual plan. But now, what's in the plan as it stands right now? Those 8 pillars include certainly things like that you would fully expect. How you focus on like early literacy efforts, right? We are actually indicating that we want to have every student graduate high school having taken and passed a college level course, a career and technical education course, and earned a service learning diploma. There are things in there also. There's a whole section on a pillar around revering our public school educators. I believe we have moved away, both as a state and a nation, from this understanding, and this is higher than respect, but actually reverence for our public school educators. And so really strategies that you will see there, action items that you will see there that are really about how do we turn that around to a place where we revere our educators. There are certainly things in there about how you engage parents and community in this critical work. There are things in there about safe and secure learning environments, but I want to focus on a couple of other things that are probably a bit unusual to have in a strategic plan. And the reason that I want to lift them up, because they are, I think, going to be as important as, focus on academic outcomes. We are in a very competitive environment. We've talked about vouchers and types of resources that are going away from public education. We have got to acknowledge and say we are in this competitive environment and act accordingly. And so a couple of strategies. Number one, Pillar 7 is around why public education is the best choice. And then Pillar 8 is going to be around galvanizing public school champions to support public education. So you will see in there actions that we believe are necessary for us to do. And this is more than just simply marketing. This isn't about trying to, shine up something. We have to certainly do that and talk about things in a positive way. But we've also got to think about significant work around narrative change. We got to talk about significant work around engaging our communities in ways that will allow them to recognize how critically important and our public schools are. I'm not saying everything is good, but there's actually more good going on in our public schools than we perhaps are led to believe. And being sure that we elevate those things along with certainly addressing challenges and issues as well. So that's what I, in fact, was hearing as I went around this state. And so that's what you'll see in this draft strategic plan as well. The only way this plan will be successful, this isn't a Mo Green plan. Folks say, well, this is what DPI is going to do. That's not what DPI. Certainly, we each have our part to play, but I was on a conversation even today with a member of the General Assembly and trying to be sure that they understand they are critical to this. Parents are critical to this. The new rural project is critical to this. All of us, if we're going to have the very best public education system in the entire country, we can't wait on Mo Green or DPI to make this happen. We are all going to have to lean in and do this. And so that's what, in many ways, and that's why I say it's different. This is a call in to our entire state to say we're going to focus on public education and make it the best that it can be.
All right. Well, I appreciate it. And I'm a product of public schools in a small rural county. They had one high school. We have two now. And so that public education is why I'm on this screen. I'm sure many folks on our team are a part of this work. So I see Ms. Shaw, you have your hand raised, Reagan. So we're going to take a question from the audience.
Right. Thank you. And thank you so much for this opportunity tonight. I had a couple of questions. The first one is for Mr. Green, our Superintendent Green. So can we get rid of our classroom display ban in Union County? Is there anything we can do at state level? In Truett's teacher evaluation guidelines, they had, and this was like a Republican who came up with the teacher evaluation guidelines. One of them was that that teachers had to prove that they were catering to a diverse group of students, that they were respecting diversity. And now fast forward to our current climate where diversity is like a boogeyman and you can get punished for actually mentioning anything related to diversity. So I'm just wondering at state level, like how is that going to translate with all of the federal bans and legislation that's going on? In Union County, we have this classroom display ban where you can't even put a poster of Martin Luther King on in a math classroom or whatever, and I think that creates an atmosphere when you can't even put anything up that promotes any kind of harmony between a diverse group of students. So is there anything that we can do at state level, or are we just stuck with this classroom display ban where teachers are just muted and have an environment that they don't feel comfortable promoting anything that has to do with cross-cultural understanding and diversity? The second question was really about there's a big push, I think, nationwide with different advocacy groups about resolutions and using those to put Republicans who are in office in the hot seat to actually make a stand for public education rather than being silent while all of this defunding of public education is going on. So I guess that question kind of goes to anyone who wants to kind of feed into that if you think that resolutions really could play a big role in that. So those are my two questions.
Okay. Thank you, Michelle. We'll definitely take that first one, and we've got a couple other questions, so we might have to come back to your resolution question.
Great. With regards to the first question, yeah, I'm not particularly familiar with what's happening in Union County, so I took some notes on that to understand better what's going on there. But I can say from a state level, certainly you've heard hopefully this evening that while certain words might be now sort of challenging words for certain communities or individuals. You're hearing from the state superintendent that I believe very strongly in what we have been doing and need to continue to do. I actually like to say that public education is probably the best example there is of DEI, of diversity, equity, and inclusion. You take North Carolina, it is a wonderfully diverse set of students that attend our public schools. Absolutely wonderful. And I'm talking certainly about race, but I'm talking about lots of other things as well. Public education at its best is about being sure that each kid gets what they need so that they can get the education they so richly deserve. And so that is, as I've already said, that is equity. And then certainly we try in public education to include all in this effort to make sure that all kids feel safe and secure as they go about trying to receive their educational opportunities. And so how that then translates to folks on the ground is something that we have to remind people again. This is what public education is about. Yeah, maybe that isn't what someone who takes a voucher and goes to some private school or uses their personal dollars to go to a private school. But for public education, this is what should be about and are about. And we ought to be so pleased that we are able to do that. And so when folks are trying to move us away from that, I think we have to call the question and remind us this is what public education is actually about. I also like to remind folks of our history. So here, even in North Carolina, I go back to the North Carolina Constitution and remind folks that, the provision that I've referenced earlier was put in place in the North Carolina Constitution, after the Civil War. And it was at a time when there were African-American males who were actually also allowed to be part of ultimately the General Assembly. But there was a constitutional convention that was called to help us put together the Constitution for North Carolina. And it included African-American males, at the time 13, that actually pushed forward this concept of public education serving all of our students. There is so much to be proud of. It's not been perfect. It's absolutely been horribly imperfect in what we've tried to do in this country. But we ought to look at those instances and say, yeah, but there are folks who try to do wonderful things to get us to the place that we have a kind of system that we have that we could build on as opposed to go backwards from. So I would suggest to us that certainly from the state level, we need to be reminding folks that this is important work. We need to be sure that we are celebrating our diversity, that we are supporting all students in every way that they need possible, and that we include all in that process.
All right, so I think we've got a couple final questions before we, let you all make some closing statements. I see Miss Jen Sanders has her hand up.
Hello, hi. Um, Thank you so much for putting this together, the New Rural Project, and everyone on the panel. And Mo Green, your trio showing up for you again. So we appreciate everything, honestly. So my question is, what are some of the goals of retaining our teachers? If we so we know that if we keep the idea is that we really need to keep our teachers in our classrooms, and that we're really struggling with teacher retainment right now, and that the whole plan is to federally defund public education to the point where they are squeezing our public schools, where our teachers can't afford to work their one job. They leave the profession because of the parent choice things that are happening to them. Um, and it really would, in the end, what I can see happening is them squeezing so much money federally out, and then the state not paying our teachers to the point where our teachers leave, and then you don't have teachers in the schools. The schools have to close, and then that's where the voucher program will sort of swoop up and bring everybody in. So I think that's their big long-term goal. So my question is, how can we continue to praise and uplift our teachers, and yet we're not paying them? So what are our thoughts or our future goals on trying to retain our teachers in North Carolina? Thank you.
Yeah, and sounds like you were directing that question to me, but if not, I certainly will give my co-panelists a chance to respond as well. Here's what I will say in short, and again, I would encourage you to look at the draft strategic plan to see what we've put in it. Certainly, we've got to be very clear that there needs to be additional compensation paid to our teachers. And when folks start to talk about other strategies and other things, and I certainly will mention a couple, people want to latch on to those and not pay attention to I think the most important thing we need to be doing is raising the compensation level for educators. And we've set the bar very clearly that we want to have the highest average salary and the highest starting salary for teachers in the Southeast, right? Because this is where we think we're going to mostly be recruiting from, and others are going to be recruiting against us on. And so this is where I think we need to be at the best levels, right? Now, if you move beyond sort of compensation, what other things do we need to do? I had during this listening and learning tour, a teacher say to me, I've heard it in other ways, but it resonated with me when she said, well, if you can't give us more money, give us more time. And I thought, there it is, right? We have got to be sure that we are also thinking about all the things we pour on to our teachers and all the things we call them on them to do, and say, enough already. We've got to take some of those things away. We got to think about how we give our educators time so that they can breathe, so that they can do professional development activities, so they can really be reminded as to why they really wanted to get into this profession at all, right? And so there's some models out there as we toward the state, and I think others that we will find out about, but you'll see very clearly in our plan that we are really focused on certainly advocating for more compensation, but also thinking about how we redesign schools and school days so that we are providing more time for our educators to educate and to do things that gives them respites from that.
All right. And we'll go to our the chair of the New Rural Project Board, Mr. Jamie Hildreth, has his hand raised, and we also have Doug Wilson, who is on our board with us today.
Hello. So first off, thank you all for being here with us today. I am Jamie. I'm the chair of New Rule Project. And I feel like my question is more directed toward you, Superintendent Green. So I'm from rural Anson County. I grew up in Wadesboro. I graduated from Anson High School. And so the question that I have is, how is it that potentially the state can, in my opinion, equalize the infrastructure issue that I think that our schools are facing? Because you made a comment earlier and you said that we have to ensure that students feel safe and secure. Part of that is literally about the building that they are in. You know, in Anson County, we have a middle school that's being used that, if I'm not mistaken, my grandparents went to. It's extremely old. It's falling apart. Even when I was there was an entire section of the school they didn't allow students to go into because they thought the roof was going to fall. You know, they are now in the process of building, of course, a brand new middle school, but it's now come to light they potentially need an additional $10 million to finish the project. So they may have a school where the walls are up that may not be able to be used. So, and there are other examples across all over the new rural project area and rural areas across the state. You know, in Richmond County, they had to delay ninth graders going to the high school so they can complete projects that needed to be done. You know, and not all of these counties are big, rich counties. You know, for instance, I know that, for instance, Mr. Kirkpatrick mentioned the east and the west in Union County, but from an Anson County perspective, you drive over to the next town over, and they're building this wonderful big new high school, Forest Hills. So, that's one of the examples of where the county literally is going to matter because the tax base just can't support these things. So I was wondering if you have that on your radar and what is a way that, we can kind of step into kind of equalize that playing field when it comes to infrastructure.
Great.
Unmute, Superintendent, there you go.
Thank you for that question. And that's another significant sort of funding issue question. It is going to take real money to provide the kind of resources necessary to provide the kind of infrastructure that we need across this state. So just to put it in context, the latest study that came out a few years ago said that there are right around $13 billion of needs for infrastructure. That's across our entire state of North Carolina, both rural communities, poor communities, and even more urban settings that may have more resources. Well, the reality is that there are certain communities then that can pass a bond, right? And that have done so to allow them to work on their facility needs. But most of our state cannot. And so that's why you saw me join, or I say you saw, but I'll just tell you that Governor Stein and I came together to support asking the General Assembly to put on the ballot a bond referendum for $4 billion. With the idea that certainly we'd look across the state, but the way that those resources would be allocated would allow more of the resources go to poor, more rural communities because they don't have otherwise a tax base to support them. So if you think about it, the way that the governor proposed was to have those communities that would be essentially in tier one, not to have any sort of matching requirement for funds to get dollars. Whereas you go to tier two is a slight match, and then tier three, the wealthier communities would have a more significant match. That will not solve all of the issues. 4 billion out of 13 billion is certainly not going to solve it all, but it moves it a substantial way down the road. And I believe that's something that we need to call on folks to do. But again, we've got to call on the General Assembly then to put that allow that to be put on a ballot, and then let the community or our state make a decision about whether it would support it. And I actually believe that if allowed to vote on it, I think our state would recognize the needs and would be supportive of such an effort.
That advocacy, I think we'll wrap on that in a few minutes, but we've got one last question. So I'm going to respect everybody's time. We want to get out of here by 8, but we could definitely keep talking because this is a subject we're all passionate about. So Ms. Stringfellow, if you could make your question just a little bit short so we can, hopefully, get this final question in, and then let Ms. Price and Reverend Kirkpatrick make any final comments.
Yes, well, I thank Ms. Price because she's written a response. But it might be good for everybody to just hear. My concern is wanting to know how we can engage more educators to be a part of the NCAE, and if she's finding that there is a fear of reprisals from the local and national government in educators coming together. Thank you.
All right, that's for you, Ms. Price.
The host may have to unmute her.
Yes, can we make sure we unmute Ms. Price? There you go.
Yes, I was having trouble unmuting. Thanks for the question. I can't say that we have heard a lot of fear of reprisal. What we are hearing and what we are seeing is a number of educators actually joining NCAE. And for the first time in more than a decade, more and more educators are joining. And we are one of the fastest growing state affiliates out of the 50 states.
Yeah.
So I'm not saying that. What I do see, or what I am hearing, is when you see educators come together with their coworkers, is they feel a greater sense of power, a greater sense of influence, a greater sense of their collective action, and that can make an impact. So we're seeing more of that. But we also have been extremely intentional about recruiting members. And in many ways, we have restructured our organization so that we have organizers whose job is to go out and talk to educators and recruit them to NCAE. In those conversations, they talk to them about what do they want to see. So you heard the state superintendent talk about creating a vision for schools. So they want to know what do you want to see? Also, what are the challenges? And probably one of the most important questions is who's responsible for not getting those things. And once they understand that there's a shared vision, that there's some shared sense of what the problem or challenges are, and that it is a man-made problem that we face, which means there is a man-made solution to the problem, then they have a greater sense that there is something that they can do about it. So that's a long way of answering the question. We don't see as much as the reprisal. We see more of building that collective action and understanding.
That's awesome. I think folks may be seeing their power, and that's a lot of what New World Project is trying to do, is amplify folks' voices so that they understand they have power. They elect these folks, they can advocate to them, and when they see serious noise from their constituents, many times, not all the time, but many times we can see change. And so I'm going to let Mr. Kirkpatrick have the last question, and then I'm going to switch it on over to Caroline to Ms. Sumter to take us home. So here's a question for you as we close out with the panel. If you could speak candidly, now I know I don't even have to put that candidly word in there for you, but if you could speak candidly to families and communities across North Carolina, what would you want them to understand about your hopes for public education and how you plan to navigate the political complexities ahead?
All right. So even as a kid, I would get in trouble because I would say what other people were thinking out loud. So I think I got that from my great grandmother. So blame it on her when you get to heaven. But I think one of the biggest and influential ways that our communities and our parents can really initiate the conversation and the movement to support public education is you cannot be fearful to be in spaces that you were not necessarily invited to. And with that being said, there are some spaces that you may never get a individual invite, but if you hear about it, show up. They're not expecting you to be there. Show up, receive the information, and go back to your communities and bring in individuals who are able to explain, because sometimes it's good just to get information and you may not necessarily understand it in depth, but there are individuals, organizations that are able to help you to understand so that you can communicate it to your communities in a way that they can understand, to the point where they will get the point that, okay, I need to do more. People will continue to do what you will allow them to do to you. And when we get to that place where enough is enough and this is not going to work, then I believe we will have a significant influence when it comes to public education. Mr. Green, he said it, Dr. Green, Superintendent Green, excuse me, he talked about how, no, we're not perfect. Public education is not perfect. But the biggest room in the whole wide world is the room of improvement. And we've got to have these tough conversations and we have to put some action behind it. My grandkids are young and they have not even scratched the surface of being in school. They don't even, they're 2 and 3 years old. And I'm hoping that when they get into school, that these conversations that we're having now will not be the same conversations we have. I hope that we'll be having more conversations about, man, we got too many teachers, or, I mean, I don't know if that's a thing, but talking about those conversations, trying to figure out, okay, how to build more schools, how to find more money to make sure that all of our schools infrastructures are up to par, those conversations that matter. And so I just feel like we do a lot of talking and that's good, but we've got to put some action behind our conversations. And I was looking at the thread and I was not listening, but reading how individuals were saying, we need to do this, we need to do that. And you're absolutely right, exchanging their email addresses. That's absolutely,
Yes.
that's what we need to do. And I'm going to put my information there because I don't know everything, but I'm willing to learn. There are some things that I need to be educated more on as I fight this fight, because this political climate that we are in right now has one agenda only. And when they use the slogan, "Make America Great Again," we have to understand who that is benefiting, who that benefited then. And when we understand historically that that was not an America that was inclusive for everybody, but just for some of them, then that should empower us to know that they do not have all of our best interests at heart. And with that being said, we cannot allow them to continue to do what they do. We cannot allow them working while we're sleeping. But we have to be just as strategic as them, because our children are suffering, our families are suffering, our communities are suffering. And if you love your community and your family and your children like you say you do, you will find ways to speak truth to power and to let these individuals who are in high positions know that this just is not going to work. And I'm glad to be on this panel with Ms. Price and Superintendent Green, because they've empowered me and educated me on some things, so that when I get off this Zoom, that I won't just be a face, but I'll be able to connect with individuals so that we can strategize and make sure that education is what it's supposed to do. So
Well, thank you. Thank you so much, Reverend Kirkpatrick. Thank you, Ms. Price. And thank you to Superintendent Green. If everyone could give them a round of applause with your emotions or your hands if you're on camera. And I think Reverend Kirkpatrick really teed it off directly to Ms. Sumter, as she will talk about how we take action, because this is all about our power. And we're saving that chat because you all had a lot of great information in there. All right, Ms. Sumter, thank you all so much. Thank you so much.
Well, I am going to be like my mama, very brief, because we do want to be mindful of your time. But as Cynthia stated, on behalf of the New World Project, we extend our deepest gratitude to our esteemed panelists and guests for joining us for this vital discussion. Your insights, perspectives, and commitment to addressing the pressing challenges in our rural communities are truly valuable. So if you say, how can we connect with New World Project going forward? These are some upcoming, not an all-inclusive list, but a high overview list of upcoming NRP events that you can attend and volunteer. We are in the process of finalizing the Rural Accountability and Transparency Tour that will be housed in Richmond County. So Richmond County, we're coming. August 2025, all roads will lead to Richmond County. Highway 74, I know will get you there. Highway 1 will also too. All right. Also, all right, for our gentlemen, Richmond Fade is coming September 2025 to a barbershop near you. You're gonna chop it up, not with me, the female, but with some other brothers leading the discussions on what is important to men and what we can do in your community. And we know back to school parents, back to school like me, I'm counting down, but it just started. Local back to school events will be August 2025. And so we'll have our phone lines, we'll send out emails if you would like to meet us, join us, or if there's an event that you would like for us to attend. And off the coattails of just urgent conversation, and we talked about Title I, we talk about communities of public education. Can you imagine not having Friday night lights? We know Friday night lights are popular in Richmond County. They're popular in most of our focus counties, but join the New Project team as we root on our Richmond Raiders. September 5th will be that football game. So come check us out and let's support our youth. And then last, but certainly not least, we have our municipal election work that we're beginning. So if you're a candidate, thinking about being a candidate, if you want to volunteer, if you want to knock some doors, reach out to us very soon. And for our folks in Anson County, we want you to join us tomorrow for our End Gun Violence Wadesboro Coalition for Peace, which will be housed at Smith's Funeral Home Wednesday, July 2nd, 2025 at 6 p.m. Meeting usually is over within an hour, hour and a half, but we'll have some great actionable steps that you can take. We know that gun violence is running rampant in our country at this time. So, with that being said, tonight's conversation was just the beginning. The dialogue we've started here will shape real solutions and drive real change. As a daughter of two public school educators, math to be specific, I know what my life would be like if I did not have my public school education. To our panelists, thank you for sharing your expertise and passion. Superintendent Green, thank you for allowing us to corner at an event to ensure that we wanted your face in the place. And thank you for being so gracious. Miss Nicole, thank you for being so gracious to step in and do what you do. You worked at Girl Magic. And Reverend Kirkpatrick, brother, we love you here at NRP. Thank you so much. So again, to our guests, your engagement and participation are what makes these conversations impactful. Let's continue this momentum, take action, work together to create a stronger and more equitable future for all. And what can you do? Attend local county school board meetings. As a local elected official, I love to see faces in the place. Join your school's PTA or PTO. Write letters to the editor. Attend legislative days to advocate for public education at the General Assembly. Call your state and local representatives and demand they support North Carolina public education and families. So thank you again to our panelists. And I cannot go on without saying thank you to this amazing team that I have the pleasure of working with every day, our New World Project team. And if you're, especially thanks to Nisi, these folks are not on camera, but they're definitely behind the scenes making this magic happen. Nisi, our organizing director, Miriam, finance and operations, Kia Smith, program associate. You've probably seen a couple emails from her. Jarvis McGee's our organizer, and Eric Reeves, Zoom master. Thank you so much to our communications associate. And to our special fearless leader, Miss Cynthia Wallace, for not strapping our hands, but actually raising it higher for us to raise the bar. We appreciate you. If you've enjoyed tonight's series, and if your interest is piqued on what you can do to help this work in rural North Carolina, here is our QR code. No amount is too small, no amount is too large to continue to work to fight the good fight here in rural North Carolina. We thank you so much for sticking with us. Stay tuned. We will have a recap email. We love to give your feedback. If you would like to partner or you have more questions, please contact one of the three or all three of us, Cynthia, our executive director, myself, overseeing policy and program, and DC Moses, our organizing director. We'll be also happy to partner and also share our resources. So again, thank you, thank you, thank you. And follow us on social media. We're on Facebook, YouTube, and Instagram. Thank you again. Have a good night. God bless you. Until the next time.